when you think you've got a pretty good level of knowledge in marketing in general, then once in a while you meet someone that is like kind of like sweep you away, or like makes you think like you know nothing, and like he's that kind of guy. And his tweets are like kind of hilarious. They're like bro style, but for marketing.
Oh yeah, okay. Marketing.
I kind of like to the point, all lowercase, very short sentences. Like if you don't do this, you die. You know, like type thing. Like very. I love that stuff. I actually stole a little bit of his like the way he's approaching Twitter. I stole a little bit of that.
Yeah, like I saw your not Insta, your TikTok stuff. It's like, if you do this stuff, quit your job right now.
What up?
Hey,
how you doing? Sorry, hold on. Let me get my headphones locked in. There we go. I'm like just having coffee, so bear with me as I get my bearings.
It's okay. What time is it for you?
8 a.m. So, but got up earlier, so like actually awake.
Are you in Denver right now?
Yeah, we're in Denver. Yeah. We're back here. We came back for the Nuggies win. The city's just been absolutely crazy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Since then, our neighborhood, they had the parade like in our neighborhood, and so it was just like madness.
Yeah, it must have been it's crazy because it's been it's the first title, right?
Yeah, it's the first title. Yeah, I mean, they had the Avalanche a couple years ago too, so it's like kind of back-to-back wins for the city. So everybody's on a high right now.
Wow. Wait, what's the Avalanche for the listeners in the UK?
It's the NHL, so the hockey.
Okay. Yeah. Wow. Nice. So Denver is the next big city to be in.
I guess, man. It's like there's so many people that have moved here. I mean, that's a part of why we did, right? We came. So my brother was living down here, and like we came down and visited him, and just the city is just crazy. Yeah. Honestly, so many transplants, and everybody wants to meet everybody. So like that's like a huge piece of it. So you go out and you'll just run into like the just random people that are 29 and running like a division at Salesforce, and you're like, oh, cool. Like this is kind of weird. Like you're a transplant from New York. That's interesting. Wow. But anyway, so that was kind of why we ended up here, and it was a good middle ground between all the things that we wanted. My girlfriend and I are both from kind of like towns in the Rocky Mountains originally. I was living in the Bay Area. She was down in Texas, and we were just like rage quit our jobs at the same time, and then digital nomaded for 12 months. So yeah, anyways, got to the end of that, and we were like, all right, we need a home again. So we gotta pick someplace that has stability.
You picked well. You
live in the outdoors lifestyle, right?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, right now I feel like all I'm doing is working, which is, yeah, like that was a big piece of it. I'm a big skier. That was kind of our we're both into the snow side of that life. And so Denver was a good spot for that. And honestly, it was like international airport. It's pretty good food, awesome music scene, and like you had the outdoors that were there and available. So kind of checked all those boxes, and we just have Google Flights turned on for like every city in the world. So anytime there's one that's like super cheap, we get emailed and we're like, cool, all right, we're going to bounce for like 2 weeks. So
that's the way to
anyways,
do it.
Yeah, I've been debating making like a Scotch cheap flight competitor, because I think that their like shit is garbage, and just like basically just turning on Google Flights and then scraping the emails, and that's like the whole product, and then just like put a UI over the top of it, charge $5 a month, and
yeah,
then Facebook ads like in a specific city for frequent travelers. So if I had more time, that's
to your list. Yeah,
I'd spin up. Yeah, exactly.
That's to your list. I think you we're gonna get to we're gonna let you introduce like yourself, like the journey. But what I wanted to say to begin with is, I felt when we met a few weeks ago, when I was saying that to Jake, it's like when you think there's at some point in your career, a few times it happens rarely, but a few times when you think like you're in a good spot, things, and you're like, I think I've got a good level of knowledge. when it comes to marketing and growth. And then you meet someone new and you're like, holy shit, this guy knows a lot of things that I completely forgot, or like new things. And that is you. So that's why you're here.
That's a huge compliment, man. Coming from you, I'm like, damn. I mean, I'm just this nobody on Twitter that shit posts, you know. So,
but yeah, I wanted to get that clear at the beginning, because that's the reason why you're here. You should know.
No, appreciate it, man. I don't know. Our first conversation, I like got a ton from you on the influencer marketing side. So feelings mutual, just on the like knowledge base. And I mean, this is what it's about too, right? It's like we're all out here just doing like degenerate marketing stuff, and the learnings that we get, it's like pass it on and try to, you know, I mean, this is how all of us have learned, at least personally. Like I'm out here, you know, I mean, my career is built on YouTube channels and like Reddit, like case studies, right? You know what I'm saying?
Caveman style, passing on the knowledge to
exactly.
Drawing on
like that's a requirement, right? Like I don't know, and that's just my belief, because there's no way you can actually learn this shit. You have to like either do it or you have to be in the pit. And I always say this, right? Like you're either in the pit or you're not. Like there's no in between. And so anyways, I don't know where you guys want to start. I think I sent a list of random stuff, but
you sent a long list, a good list of a lot of things that I think we should touch on, most of it, to be honest. But before we do you want to give us like a quick I guess like minute elevator pitch of your like career all the way to where you are now?
Yeah. That's I'll just do the bullet points. So I was like, I started out in high school and I was like, how do I sell things on the internet? Just like everybody. And then from that devolved into, I got hired at a B2B marketing agency, like fresh out of school. I basically dropped out of college twice because I was running online businesses and they like went viral, and I was like, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And then, you know, left. They exploded because I like didn't know how to build brands, and like ended up going back to school because I was like, okay, I'm gonna, you know, be poor. But anyway, I've been building software since like 2015, 2016 in some version or another. It's always been like small little script things. I'm not super technical. I always joke I'm like a script kiddie, and now I've evolved into a prompt jockey. But the I basically got my really like my bearings when I was working at this B2B marketing agency. The founder of the company, he was like a YC alum, you know, did the whole startup thing, and he kind of indoctrinated me into like, oh, here's all of these, you know, ways to think about the world, and we can apply them to like the B2B world. And so that was like this, you know, trial by fire education. But I mean, I was you know, working for like Fortune 500 companies there, and we were basically like, I was doing digital strategy, and they would just give me these test budgets, and it's like, yeah, just go spend this and tell us what the data says. And I'm like, what the fuck is this? Like, sorry, I don't know if you guys drop F-bombs on this, but I'm going to do it.
Yeah, go for it. It's fine. I always say explicit when
cool.
So go for it.
Anyway, so from there, I was like building products and projects on the side, was doing some consulting, ended up leaving that company, and honestly just like was like traveling, like living off of friends' couches. And this was like my mid-20s, right? So again, quarter life crisis, quit my job, broke up with my girlfriend, broke the lease on my apartment, bought a mountain bike, bought a surfboard, and was like just traveling around the US, living with friends and crashing and, you know, doing like consulting work remote. Fast forward, a friend of mine was out in the Bay, and he was like, hey, you know, I'm working at this company. It's one of the fastest growing things I've ever seen. Like, you should come help me out, basically build this out. And so like my background was in basically building kind of infrastructure for early stage companies. And I always say like, what I'm really good at is like, a company's got product market fit. They know there's a target audience. They don't know how to build distribution. And that's what I like doing, what I'm good at. So I kind of come in and like build those pieces out. So we went out, that company's called Rupa Health. We took it from like a $20 million valuation to 110 in like 6 months. It, you know, basically just grew really fast, really quick, super fun. I always joke that like, as soon as there's HR, I typically dip because I'm not built for those types of companies. Basically got to scale, and I was building side projects on, you know, outside of my day job. And they had gotten traction and kind of could subsidize my life. And so I ended up leaving Rupa. I was on the fence of like just going all in on my own stuff or doing like going working as a head of growth at another company. And so I ended up working for this crypto company for like 3 months before Terra Luna collapsed. I thought we were insulated, and I was like, cool, like this makes sense. I like the co-founders, the product, awesome team, super good. They're actually based out of the UK, and the product like no longer exists, obviously. But we were doubling month over month for like 4 months, right? It was basically a DeFi powered savings account. We thought we were insulated. They were all everybody's funds was in like a non-custodial wallet. It was all like super legit. And so the collapse happened. We did a retro, and I was like, you don't have a business model anymore. Like, I wouldn't be paying me. Like, you should fire me. So I told the CEO that, and they let me go like the next week. And then from there, basically just tried to figure out what the next product was. Now we're working on Swell AI. It's basically an AI writer for podcasters and creators. So Max and I had met at Rupa. This was like a side project. Literally the first version we built in like September of 2023, or sorry, September of last year. It was like a Google Drive folder that we had our friends upload MP3s to, and then we'd like download the MP3s locally. We'd like run the code to build the content, upload it back to the Google Drive folder. And then, that was like the first version of the product. And that's really where we're at now. Now it's at scale. We're writing like tens of millions, of words per month for users, managing like, thousands of uploads. It's like growing at like 50% month over month. So just crazy.
So cool.
But it's self-funded. We haven't raised yet.
Yeah.
I don't think we will. Right now we don't need to. Both Max and I kind of have like other things that are annuities. So we don't really need the capital. And we're just also out here. He's like what do they call it? Like basically like climbs mountains. Like that's what he like likes to do. And he just got into like kite, like, into paragliding. So like he basically will like summit these mountains and he paraglides down. So he kind of just like, both of us are obsessed with freedom and like being like, oh, I'm going to take off this week and like, just go chase snow and Canada or whatever. So that's kind of where we're at with it. But anyway, sorry, that was way, long-winded, but that was the high level. So
it was good. It was good to see the progression to like, why you guys are on Swell AI now, and the kind of like the logic behind all the steps. And also we should say Jake and I are using Swell AI
totally
to power this podcast.
I love it, man. Gets me stoked.
all or most of the copy is made by AI using your tool. So pretty cool.
No, man, I'm so excited about it because like we're empowering a lot of creators, and like I keep telling people like we're entering the age of the creator, and everybody's talking about this, right? But like I firmly believe that you're going to see these creators build these media brands where it's like $1 million worth $1 million companies, and it's maybe 1-2 employees, and that's the future. And then what's going to happen is basically they're going to be the ones that build the software. They're going to be the ones that build the skincare companies or whatever, right? Because they have this distribution and they have this trust that they've cultivated with an audience that's so much deeper than a brand ever could. It's just this. I mean, when you think about the most iconic brands, it makes sense too, right? Like you have like Apple, Steve Jobs. Like it's always an individual like that people are associating, like one face, one name that they're associating with. So if we just take that same philosophy and apply it to the creator, like that's why they're going to have all this leverage within the market. And you're already seeing the beginnings of this happen. And what AI is doing is basically enabling this to happen at a like way faster pace than it was previously. Where it's like, okay, cool. Like I can start this podcast like you guys are doing. I mean, you're in the top 100 like UK marketing podcasts in like 3 weeks or whatever.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy, right?
Top
and
20.
So, top 20, exactly. Like even more.
Right.
It's nuts. But anyways, that gets me hyped.
No, it's exactly that. When we started this, what I said, I think in the first or second episode, is that I actually did start 2 years ago, and I always like kick myself that I kept going from what I started 2 years ago. But the issue is that 2 years ago I didn't have access to like technology like what you guys have built. It was taking me so long to like work on the transcript. Like the automations were a little bit there, but there was no AI behind it to actually come up with the content on top of it. and that's just the beginning. Like what you guys build is like fresh out of the oven. It's like the first few iteration of the tool. You're releasing new features like at a speed that is like pretty insane. So I can't wait to see like what it's going to be in 6 months, 1 year, like when all of this develops. But yeah, that's the story.
We're pretty stoked. I think the thing that I'm most excited about with it is, so we basically use a vector database to index all of the content that people upload into it. I won't get like super technical, but the idea is like I can have this corpus of information and then I can do a call against it, and it's going to find like everything relative to the call that I do. So imagine hypothetically in the future, like I can upload an entire back catalog to Swell and I now have this like, searchable database that I can provide to my audience. So as a creator, right? Like say I'm a business coach, or like I interview people about like running their businesses or side hustles, like, books are mentioned. There's all of this like trapped knowledge that's in these back catalogs that people don't know how to access and don't know how to find. I can go to this, like, what we're envisioning is I can put an embed, on a website. They can be like, hey, like when did they mention XYZ problem? And we'll show them all the episodes that happened previously. And it'll also give them like a synopsis, like, oh, here's an overview of like what they say in episode, 17, 21, and 35. And then we'll pull that back. And so I don't know, to me, that's like the biggest like thing is like, I think there's all this like trapped information that we can like start to, get more like public. And then that technology is like, oh, cool, that works for podcasts, but like it works for any written text, right? So then what happens when we start to like deploy that for other use cases? So anyway, I mean, we can get into all that.
Yeah, no, it's fantastic. Now go on, Jake. You wanted to say something?
I was just going to say, I love that idea, and I think I was just thinking as you said it, Cody, about like the trap knowledge that is in podcasts and also in YouTube videos, and obviously now you can. I'd say 9 out of 10 searches where I have a specific question about something, the first result that I click will be like Google having indexed a part of a YouTube video where that content is referenced, which is cool. But also I'm like, I don't want to watch it. I want it to just be written in front of me. So it's cool that it's in that video, but I need it delivered to me right now without me having to sit and watch it. So I definitely agree that that's the future. It's amazing.
Totally. Yeah. Like transformed into that version that you're like trying. I think that's how I'm thinking about it more and more. Like we talk about this in social media where it's like, you should, always make content that's like ready for the platform. Right. So it's like, it's platform native. And I think that like what we're going to see with AI is it's going to have that same ability to like make like platform ready, or like wherever you are, it's going to meet you there, no matter what form it was in originally. So it almost repurposes itself like into that moment, like when you arrive there. So it's like, you're saying, hey, I'm finding an answer in a YouTube video, but I don't want to watch this clip of some random person. Like I just want the explanation. Well, It's going to be able to pull out, that section and be like, okay, now it's going to, transform it into written text. Maybe it's a bulleted list of here's the steps that you need to do, and you're going to be able to interact with it in that way. So, I mean, I'm shocked that Google hasn't done that already. Like they're sitting on all of this knowledge. It's crazy, right? Like, So, I think it is the classic thing though, right? You have these incumbents that are afraid to lose market share and erode their current business model. And like, I mean, it's just classic.
And you can come in and just you take a little piece of it yourself. Yeah,
exactly. And I mean, that's what I mean, this is me personally, but like, I mean, we've been building this company, right, for the last 8 months. So whenever, September. And like, it's worth more now than the equity that I have in all the companies that I've worked for, right? Like in startup world, like why it's total, like the world is totally changed where it's like, okay, we need 2 people. We probably don't need to hire anybody. And like, I keep talking to these other like AI founders, right? And I'm hearing the same thing where they're like, oh yeah, we like, we get asked by these VCs, like, what would you do if I gave you $2 million today? And they're like, yo, we don't need 2 million. I need 50K and 12 months of runway. Like I'm not going to hire any employees, and we're going to build $1 million company and then go raise our A. Like that's how they're thinking about it. And so same deal with like, I think VCs are starting to realize this as well. Like I've a friend here in Denver, and she works for an early stage. They just write seed checks, and we got coffee the other week, and it was, the same conversation. I'm like, are you guys thinking about like the requirements are way lower, but you have to deploy this fund that's 50 million, right? And okay, so say you used to write $1 to $2 million checks previously. So you're writing, whatever that is, like 20 to 50 checks, depending on like, the deal size. Well, now, okay, you have to write 100K checks. So you're writing 500 checks. Like, how are you going to manage that? There's no way, right? So
yeah, it's true.
And I think they're starting to like think about that and be worried about that, and also like what is the automation. So I think that it's the age of like, you know, 2-person companies that are doing 10 million ARR. Like, that's how I'm thinking about it, and like we're seeing that happen, right? So yeah. Anyways, that's just kind of brain dumping the the stuff I feel like that's changing in venture. But
I love that, and you know, they say that you should be investing in like the founder rather than just the business around it or the idea around it. And I think that if exactly what you just said, if it's like I have an idea and I'm the kind of brains, I'm the person that's come up with the idea, all I need to execute on that idea is like $15.99 a month subscription to this, $25.99 a month subscription to that, and that's my team.
It's crazy, man. I mean, it's straight up like, again, we could talk about the agent stuff we're starting to see, but like I really believe that in the next, like, and we're building versions of this, right? And like, I mean, we haven't added this to Swell, and like we don't know if we will. It might just be other companies, but like my vision is that. And 5 years ago, I was like, you know, we're probably at this point where like I have API connection access, and like I basically like know what I want the user to do, right? And it's like it's just a closed system. Like, I want this action to happen. I have these resources. Like, could I just like plug in, you know, to this marketing brain, like plug my company in, and then it just starts doing things. And like I think we're at that tipping point, and like this is how I'm thinking about the company building now more and more. Is like, okay, cool. Like, if we just build this like distribution is the hardest thing. Yeah. So we build this distribution machine where it's like, cool. And like we have an agent that knows how to run Facebook ads, and we have an agent that knows how to make creative, and we have an agent that knows how to run Google ads, and we have an agent that knows how to do like SEO content, right? And they all work together. We jokingly keep calling them like Brad, Chad, Vlad, you know. But so all these agents, like they have these specific skill sets, and then there's like a, you know, orchestrator of them all. Yeah. Right. And basically can deploy them. Like, what happens then when, I don't need a marketing team anymore? Like, I can just augment. And also as like a, you know, I mean, a self-funded company, like you can just spin off these products one after the other. I mean, if you have a good engineer now that's like a 10x engineer, like a traditional 10x engineer, and they are using like AI to supplement their writing code. I mean, they can write code like a 100x engineer. As an example, like my co-founder, like he was writing like over like 50% of the code that was going out, right? Like at the previous company that he was at. And yeah. I mean, that's insane, right? Like it's a single person that's doing that on a massive team. So when you put them in a setting where it's like, okay, cool. Like they have that and this distribution piece is figured out. And so then it just turns into the human elements where it's like half of my day anymore is spent just like on sales calls, you know, closing deals, right? Exactly. But it's like, okay, like it's those types of things that are going to be, I think, the hard ones to automate, because there is those human pieces that are still there. But anyway, it's
I think it's a super interesting point, like what you said about marketing. And I think in some version of pieces of that might take still a bit of time to come through. I still think that having like some sort of like marketing operators or like distribution, what did we say? Like I think like an almost like an orchestrator of all of these agents is the person that you're gonna need, and that's it. You know, like someone who like is good at making sure like all these agents are doing the right thing. But totally. Basically that's your marketing team.
And imagine they live in your Slack, right? You're just like Brad, you know, like you spin up a Facebook ad campaign, target this, you know, this interest group or whatever, or find me an interest group that's related to XYZ keyword, right? Yeah. And then it just goes and it figures those pieces out. And like, here's the creative assets. They live in this Figma file, like use anything from this tab or whatever, right?
Absolutely.
And again, I think it's still early, but like, I mean, we know these degenerate engineers that like gave a credit card to an agent and it's like running a print on demand shop, like, you know, and it's like, it's not making a ton of money. Like it's like 3%, you know, like the margin's like 3% a month. But I mean, you know, if you scale that up and it gets more efficient, holy shit. Like what does that do also just in like, you know, I don't know. So I studied economics in college. And so I always think about like, just like, you know, the economic gaps that exist and that type of thing is probably just like, you know, ingrained in me at this point. But like, okay, well, it's kind of two things where it's like, okay, if I own the robots that are working and building the software, like what happens then from like, just like, you know, like the value creation and then who owns those? And simultaneously, it's like all of the higher tier, like AIs, for example, GPT-4 is more expensive than ChatGPT Turbo, and GPT-4 is better. Like if I'm trying to educate my kids or whatever, or have access to the higher AI, like only the rich are going to be able to afford that. It creates a larger gap in like accessibility. And then, it kind of creates this virtuous cycle. So there's this part of me that's in this moment where I'm like, okay, this is like, you have to be in part of this and have to be doing this, because like, if you're not like riding this wave while it's coming in, like you're going to be so far behind. I mean, and I say all this, but I'm also living in a bubble, right? Like I'm talking to you guys, we're talking to all of our friends that are building these things. And then I go to a family dinner up in rural bumfuck North Idaho, and like, they don't give a shit about this. Like it hasn't even touched their life. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, it's totally a bubble. But I think, I think it's going to seep into all parts of society, just based off of what we're seeing. Like, it's like, because it's actually creating utility. I think that's the thing that's been like different from all of these other like other waves that have happened. Like again, crypto, like it's like, maybe it's providing some utility, but like, I mean, if for example, with you guys, like, and how Swell's writing like your show notes or whatever, it's actually augmenting what was, so the AI is actually augmenting what people were doing previously. I think that's the difference, right? Like we had these workflows, like you had to write show notes, right? Like Swell is a great example, and nobody wants to write show notes. Like it's the most, I mean, rather so boring. It's just like pulling hair, right? But now it's like, okay, yeah, exactly. Now it totally automates that, it augments it. And show notes are one of the most impactful, things that you can do. And so I think those applications, like it feels like a base technology. It feels like electricity. It feels like internet. It feels like mobile. And then I think this is the next version. But again, I'm probably red pilled at this point. I'm also making money off of it, so of course I'm red pilled. And tomorrow GPT-5 could come out and it does everything for us. And like who knows?
Exactly. But for us, I'll just to give a bit more context. Like for me, like the most important thing that we get from your tool is for me is the timestamp. Find it so useful, and it actually gives a name to each timestamp based on what's been said, and I actually find those titles to be the most powerful one out of all the suite of content that you provide. Like some of these titles in the timestamps are like so accurate and really, really well written. We also want to use it for the launch of the newsletter, which we're going to do soon. Because he writes a blog post or a newsletter even. I think there's even like a newsletter summary or synopsis. Basically everything that you read from this podcast, the description, what we write on LinkedIn. Like today I did a post from the episode that just came out this morning. All the bullet points are based on your tool. Took me awesome, like half a second. I just add my touch on top of it just to make it a bit more personal, but that's easy. It takes me a minute. So
totally. I mean,
so useful.
That's our thesis, right? Like, I don't think it's going to replace people entirely. I mean, it can, right? Like I've got an AI writer right now that's like, we just hooked it up to a search console on a blog, and it's just like perpetuating itself, like based off its data, right? I'll actually like start talking about it more publicly later. But the idea is like, it can be like untouched by humans. How we see currently, like with Swell, like what we're trying to get is 90% of the way there. And then that last 10% is where the magic happens, right? Where it's like a good marketer comes in, they know how to put these final touches that really make it, like it has that magic, right? Or that it has that flavor. So, I mean, with Swell right now, like you can basically prompt it to do anything, right? Like anything that you could write, like that you could imagine writing about a podcast, like it can do that at this point. And we're starting to see more YouTube creators do this as well, especially ones that are like educational. Like, we have some guys where they do like, the military videos where it's like this Abrams tank, like blah, blah, blah. And then it goes through the whole history of the like, the tank in World War II. And then they come in and they want to turn that into like, an article that they put on a blog or whatever. And they're using Swell to kind of do that transformation. But yeah, I mean, for me, I'm looking at it and it's like, also, this is just like a view on how content's going to be created, right? Because like anybody right now can go to ChatGPT, and if I give them like a blog post outline, like they're going to get 99% of the same thing if there's like two different people in two different places, right? So I'm calling that commodity content. So it's just like things any AI could write, right? Where all the like branded magic like is going to happen now, and like branded content is going to come from, is like internal information that only the company has access to, right? So that's like reports, that's like case studies, that's, you know, like fireside chats, that's podcasts, like whatever those things are. So what we're trying to do is basically build the tool that can generate all of that, you know, branded content. Like I can take this whole, you know, like different varieties of internal information and then transform that into whatever I want, right? So it's like I can turn that into blog posts, I can turn that into LinkedIn posts, I can turn that into Twitter threads, whatever I'm trying to do with it. Because that's going to be the only way to differentiate anymore. Like
Exactly.
there's no way that you're going to have uniqueness in this age of like commodity content. So
you need your own data set, and that's actually a good segue to something that by the time this episode goes out, I might have go out. I'm talking to myself in the future, but we're working on something at the company I work for, Nude, which is AI for personal finance using our own data, and I think that is gonna be game changer. Totally. So not only looking at the past of your transaction, you being able to talk to your money, but on top of that, the AI can predict your next purchase based on the data set of your user and who you look like in terms of lifestyle. Can give you your next, like you recognize you bought a car and you're gonna buy, the probability of you buying this and this next is like 90%. So you can make suggestions based on that, build partnerships based on that, so you can get deals and stuff. Like it's crazy. It opens up like so much. I can't wait, but it's like that's the next wave. So yeah,
100%. I think really cool. To piggyback off that, like something I've been seeing and I've just been telling people is like all these companies that were built in like 2010, you know, and like around there. Like a great example is like all these like social media scheduling apps, like later.com as an example. Like they all have this moment right now where they can be disrupted, right? Like they're trying to layer on like AI tools and shit. And it's just like bloatware that doesn't work, that solves no real problem. But if you're a founder, right, and you come in and you build, as an example, like I can upload all of my blog posts, right? And it just like writes tweets, and then it looks at the Twitter data and it sees, oh, tweets like this get the most reach, right? And now like go back to my corpus, now write more tweets that are similar to that. And like that's like, you know, we'll talk about this probably at some point in this pod about like growing Twitter accounts, because like it's a huge arbitrage right now. But like that's the process, right? It's like I'm looking at the data, like what's working, like let's do more of what's working and less of what isn't. But I mean, if you automate that and then take that to brands, right? And it's their own data that they already have. So it's like you already know that they like the outputs are going to be what they're looking for because they've already written it previously or whatever. Like you can go and disrupt a later and there's no way they're going to be able to pivot, right? Buffer, later, all of them. Like EHRs are probably another one. Like all of these kind of companies that were built in that, like they're 15 years old at this point, you know? Like I think people are forgetting that. And we have a new base technology. So all of that can be rewritten. So I think that like, you know, that's a huge change that's incoming. And the founders that are thinking about that and build tools that basically, you know, from the base layers AI up, right? But it's in those categories already, right? Social media scheduling, again, it's just as an example. You already know there's a huge user base. Like you don't have to validate the idea; you're just remixing it. I mean, You can just print, like build something, and you'll just print. Like there's no question. So.
Yeah, I love that idea. You can kind of expand on that idea about going back to your existing information and generating more content about like what it knows what is working already, and it could be telling you the content that you need to produce internally. You know, like anyone wants to start making content as a company, they put it out there, they have to go through that whole process of what are people engaging with, and whilst they're doing that, they're thinking, oh shit, what are we going to write about next? What are we going to do next? Testing all these different subjects. You'd only have to do that for a small window, and then the technology just does all the heavy lifting for you, and it starts going back going, you know, this and this work really well together, so I've like come up with 10 topics that bring both of those two together, which is going to get you even more engagement around that make me some content around this? And you're like, okay, cool. It's much easier for me to do that than having to sit down and think it and plan it. You could even go down and it could write you the specific show notes that you're going to talk about. It basically, you work backwards from the end result of the show notes to create the show, to create the content, and then he puts it out there for you.
Yeah, I mean, we've been seeing this trend on like TikTok and YouTube Shorts, right? Where they have people with like a mic and they're, it looks like they're on a podcast, but they're actually not, right? And I think that like, imagine it's going to look at your clip data and be like, oh, like these ones are the best performers, like make more, like you need to do shows about this because there's more likelihood that it's going to create the clips that go the most viral. And so again, it creates this flywheel. And that's like what we're all trying to do in like any growth marketing role. Like I'm putting things out there. I'm like collecting the data. I'm analyzing what works and what didn't. And then that influences my next rotation. And it's just like, it's a lifestyle, right? Like it's not, I think that's the difference. Like everybody used to look at like, I would do a launch campaign and like, I would like do a campaign and it would end. And it's like, no, like these things can just run on in perpetuity. Like they actually should. And as a founder, you should be doing that, right? Like it's like you're trying to find marketing arbitrage and then layer those arbitrages on together. It's like find the arbitrage, automate as much of it as you can, move on to the next thing. Okay, find the arbitrage, automate as much as I can. I layer that on, and like that's how you actually make compounding growth curves. Like it's not you like doing the same thing over and over again, or just like it's combining all of these things together so that it creates a larger system. And that's exactly. I always call it digital gravity. Like you're trying to make digital mass on the internet, right? Like, and this is how you really go 0 to 1 with brands and like start companies. Like when you start out, you're like this tiny speck and you have no influence in your space. So you have to like build mass online, and that's how you get more influence and you get more people in rotation and you get more touchdowns to be happening over and over again. So anyway, that's my view kind of on this and where I see it going.
I love this.
That's
analogy.
a TikTok clip right there. Literally, as you were saying that.
I love that. I love that idea. I just call it momentum, but I like the gravity, creating mass. That's really cool. That's the issue with most marketing teams now in like big or small businesses, is like they just do things for the sake of doing things. Like there's no, and most content just lives once as well, which is like so frustrating. There's no like feedback loop on like what's working. Let's do more of that, or that piece of content that worked once, why not repost it again, or like a version of it again and again until you really like milk that the best content that you've got. Like there's a big gap in that field. And I think the advancement of like AI and everything that we just talked about for the last 20 minutes or so, I think solves that, automates that, but also replace those teams. So good luck.
Yeah, but I mean, what are they doing though, right? Like you just to your point, they're moving, but they're not going anywhere, right? Like you going forward, right, left, back, and I mean, you're in the same place. You moved, but you didn't move any direction. So like I always like tell people, it's like you have this goal, like I have this like scope of pure view. Like you gotta go, like you're trying to take like any step north, right? So it's like it can be northwest, it can be northeast, but like you're trying to always step in some way north, right? Because that's where you're trying to go. So I think I'm looking at, if you're a young marketer, right? And you're like, how do I stand out in this new age? Like if you figure out how to employ AI to do versions of your job, and you come in and you're, basically producing, like you're a 20, you're 10, like you're 10 people as a single person. I mean, you will climb ranks so fast, and just have that mindset that like, okay, this is this like recurring thing that I'm learning from, and it's getting better like with every revolution, right? There's so much opportunity for people that do that right now. So
yeah, I think the difficult thing right now is that a lot of people think this is the task this is my job. I want to automate from 1 to 100 of that whole thing. And they spend ages trying to do that, and they never quite get there. They're like, oh, fuck AI, I'm just going to go back to doing it myself. But I think what you need to see it as, take everything you do, chop it up into segments. And if you can get like even 40% of that handled by AI, and you need to do the rest, that gives you all that extra time to spend on the creative stuff and the bits and bobs where your hands aren't on the keyboard. And I think that's the mindset to have right now, because these things aren't perfect, and they're not going to do. You're not going to go out there tomorrow and find something that's going to write the podcast create it automatically for you, put it out there, get the growth of it. That's just not going to be the case. Maybe in the future, yes, but rather than forgetting about it now, I think it's just get it to the point where it does a lot of that heavy lifting, and then you'll be in a good place in the future as you incrementally better and better and better until it does get to that 90-100% spot.
100%.
That's so good. Let's try and move on in the topics a little bit. Before we actually move on away from a bit from the product, you didn't really mention. I want you to talk about briefly on the latest release from Swell and the B2B like content creation based on keyword and stuff. Can you talk about that a little bit, because that's really cool, and then we can talk about Twitter.
Yeah. So, so we just pushed this in Swell. We're probably going to spin it out into like its own company too, just because where we see it going, it's like a lot of there's a larger use case that's like more powerful, and having it within Swell just feels it feels bloated. Like it doesn't serve like it just kind of distracts from the core product. But anyway, yeah. So what it is, you can basically like you upload a list of keywords, and imagine like you upload 100 of them, and you hit write. And 2 minutes later, you have 100,000 words of blog posts written that are about those keywords, right? And so, like how I'm telling people to use this, and where this really came from is this is just an SEO strategy that I employ. So you find a competitor or like a blog that's in the space that you're in. You put them in SEMrush. You look at their keywords, and then you sort by low keyword difficulty, right? So there's all these keywords that are, as an example, like related to podcasting or related to B2B marketing that have a KD of 0, right? So if you just write something that's like an exact match for that keyword phrase, you're going to rank within 14 days. And this is the whole idea, right? So we were like, okay, well, could we put this into the product? And it was really just to validate, like, would people want this? Because I'd been talking about it on Twitter, and people were like, how do I get this word? Because, the initial version was like a Python script that I had hacked together, right? That's like living in my VS Code. But what we saw is like, we're publishing these articles, and they're not perfect. Like they're far from it, right? But if I can go and as an example with Swell, like we wrote like 500,000 words, right? And it's after all of these long tail, low KD keywords. Like it doesn't even matter if they get some traffic, like that. It costs me, less than a cent to write each of those articles, right? So in the aggregate long term, it's going to make a ton of impact for the business, from an ROI standpoint. So kind of our strategy is like we find those keywords. We then basically write these articles about them, publish them to our CMS. We then, whichever ones start getting traffic will then come in, and that's when we refresh the content. And maybe there's some like human touch where it's like, okay, now this organization happens. But no humans touching it until it's actually doing anything because like, again, as you guys know, like in the SEO space, it's like, I'll write 100 articles, 10 of them will produce, 90% of the traffic ever of those 100 that I publish. Yeah. Well, why are we spending all this time, going after all of these? I can just get that first version out. Exactly. Yeah. Right. And again, this probably doesn't make sense for like large companies, but if you're an early stage company, like this isn't, it's a no brainer, right? Like I can go and I can pay. I think right now on draft.co, if you want to write a 2,000 word article, it's like $150, right? Okay. So we'll just call it 100 and say that I'm wanting to write, 1,000 articles, right? Like that's 10 grand right there. Yeah. Whatever. That's $100,000. I think my math was wrong. Yeah. No public math, right?
No public math. Yeah. Took a risk.
Yeah. You took a risk. Yeah. $100,000. So I can spend $100,000 to write 1,000 articles, or I can have, I can build the script and have Chat GPT write them we did it for 100 articles. So 10, that's like $81. So for $800, I can write 1,000 articles, right? Like, so, what are you going to do? Like, what's going to make the most impact for your business, right?
Yeah.
Again,
it's a no-brainer.
Yeah. This is a moment though, right? Like this arbitrage is fleeting, and it's like, we'll probably talk about podcast growth and like how to grow podcasts, like at some point during this call, but like, this conversation. But, the one thing I want to emphasize to all the marketers listening to this is like, when you find an arbitrage, like you have a short window to capitalize on it, right? So like if you see that as much resources as you can allocate to that arbitrage, like you put it there as like, aggressively as you can, because 6 months from now it could be entirely gone. A year from now it probably will be, especially in this space. And I mean, something that we're this is like totally outside of Swell, but like a business opportunity right now is just like make extremely specific niche sites that are like, curly hair, right? Or whatever, right? Like pick any category. There's so many keywords that have low KD that are related to that. And if you just build a software that spins these niche sites out, you probably have a 3 to 5 year window where you can just like print, like with these blogs that you have no customers for, and AI is writing for you. And then again, you just ingest that. Like the future of this is like, okay, well, I can ingest the Search Console data of my blog. So now it's refreshing the content that I already published. So it's getting like, it's writing better SEO content. And it's also saying, hey, here's all these keywords that you're on page 2 for, that you're getting a ton of impressions for, but you're not getting any traffic. Okay, cool. We're going to write a new blog that's focused on that specific keyword. And this is all automated, right? Like this is where we're headed. And like, this is where we see the opportunity. This is all automated so that it just is like your blog is basically like, as it writes, it gets smarter. As it gets smarter, it writes more. As it writes, and it just is this like, ever growing thing, and with no human oversight. And then as you have these have these pages that get a ton of traffic, then a human can come in, they can look and basically tighten it up and make it more specific or make those improvements. But there's all of that like legwork to get that initial like momentum. That's all going to be handled by these types of tools. So I mean, and it's also awesome. Again, it's gonna evaporate. So it's like take advantage of it while you can. Because like now. Because everybody's figuring this out, right? Like we're all talking about the same stuff. Like it's just like, how do you deploy it? And just like, again, you guys are advanced marketers, right? So you have all these like frameworks and skill sets and ways that you approach problems. Like you know how to do these things. So it's like, okay, well, how can I make the AI do the thing that I would do manually previously? That's all we're trying to do, right? So anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah,
really cool. Should we move onto Twitter?
Let's do it.
I wanted to talk about that. It's been pretty impressive to see the growth you had over the last few months. Like you'll tell us when you started, but you're going pretty fast, and you've got a particular style to it, which I have to say I stole a little bit. Took some inspiration from. I think your direct approach to writing tweets and 20 a day is pretty fascinating. It kind of breaks the feed for me. Like when I see tweets and I see like the typical threads and like my top 5 takeaways or whatever. Like when I see your tweets, I feel like, okay, no, that's the one I want to read because it's like really pinpoint and it looks like it's working well, or at least delivering a lot of exposure for you. So yeah,
totally.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah. I mean, I like full transparency. My biggest fear is like any type of fame. Like I want to be able to like go out on the street and go like go to a restaurant and like no one knows who I am, right? So like I actually like don't do these typically, but you guys are legit, so I'm like, okay, cool. I'm gonna talk.
You can put an emoji over your face.
Yeah, exactly, right. But so
we're in the different countries, so it's fine. Don't worry.
Yeah, exactly. He's popular in Europe. So anyway, the thing that we started talking about, and like really this is Max and I's goal, is like we're like, own distribution is the future. We talked about this creator thing earlier in the pod. It's that same idea. Like I want to have these own distribution channels where it's like anything that we build, we have immediate customers, right? So like really what happened is like another arbitrage moment came up. Like Twitter got acquired. They started doing this for you thing. And like I was just running the data and I'm like, this is the cheapest CPM that exists on the internet right now, right? Like I have 3,500, or I don't even know what it is right now, like 3,700 followers, and I got 2 million impressions in the last 30 days, right? So like it's crazy. Like I'm paying $8 a month for 2 million impressions. Like I couldn't get that CPM anywhere else online, right? And so how I'm thinking about it is like, how you do a traditional media buy. So my whole process has been like let's do the opposite of what everybody else was doing. I hate thread boys. It drives me crazy. Like, and it just feels like this, it's like, so it's like, okay, cool. Like, let's just do this thing that is more interesting to me, which is like, let's just try to, as little language as possible, but it's like conveying the idea like that we can, right? I mean, it's basically, we're just taking like traditional copywriting. It's that same idea, right? Not making these long-winded things. Like, I don't care about like being perceived as an intellectual. Like, that's actually like a nightmare, right? Like, I want to be like, like the dream, the dream is that I'm viewed as like some podunk, like hippie cowboy that somehow like found a laptop when he was in his teens, and like, that's really what happened, right?
Oh, what's that?
Then, exactly. And so, but with that, like my whole process, just to talk through, because I think it'll be interesting for people, is like like every Sunday we'll sit down and I write like 70 tweets for the week, and it's variable, but most of the time that's what happens. So basically, the whole process is I like look at the tweets from the last 3 months that had the most virality, and I'll remix them or write stuff that are similar or related ideas, right? So basically the process is like, I publish all this stuff. So again, 10 tweets a day, so 70 a week. I do just like use a scheduling app, like, which is again, against like what everybody says that like, don't use scheduling apps. I'm like, dude, I have things to do, right? Like this is, I'm trying to optimize this as much as possible. So, I spend probably like 2 hours a week doing this, and it's producing 500,000 impressions per week. Like that's the whole, I don't know a better ROI right now, like that exists, like just to build this. So write 10 tweets, look at that data, which ones are the best performing, write 70 tweets, look at the data, look at the best performing, then write 70 more tweets, creates this flywheel. And from that, what you get is like, you just have the account starts to grow, right? So like now it's like grows at like 50 followers per day, right? So like for every 1,000 impressions that I get on a tweet, like I'm growing by a follower, basically, right? So it's like, cool, I'm averaging 50,000 impressions per day, like getting 50 followers per day. So the idea is like this can be done, I hate personal brand, but like what we're trying to do is basically a version of that, right? It's like I'm trying to build own distribution, but this can be done for your company as well, right? So like this same process we use on the Swell Twitter, like we're going to optimize this, like we're going to have like we're going to automate this whole thing, so it just creates this viral loop of it like basically like writing itself and growing itself. But honestly, it's been crazy, just the people that you meet through this process. Like I met you guys, which is crazy, right? Also like all the inbound I get is just wild, like just really, I'm just shit posting. I'm shit posting growth porn, like that's really all this is.
Growth porn.
Yeah. And that's what people, there's, again, I'm trying to lay out like, this is the things that I'm seeing and this is what's working for us. Right. And I think that is like this huge, like if you have that unique perspective and simultaneously are just like pumping out like the volume, like these accounts will 100% grow. And like I don't care about Twitter, right? Like it's like the last thing I want to be doing is online, honestly. Like at the end of my day, like I want a book and I want a bottle of wine and I want to sit on the roof with like my girlfriend and my dog. And so but for right now, again, this is a marketing arbitrage that exists. Like we can capitalize on this. And the reason that this like they're trying, and it makes sense, right? Like Musk is trying to get more engagement to happen on the platform. Why do they want more engagement? They want more people to be spending time on it. Why do they want more people? Because they can sell more ads. They're having an ad, they're having a revenue deficit or whatever. Like, so all of these incentives make sense for why this is happening. So it's like, okay, this is just one of those channels for distribution. And then what are the other ones? And it's, stuff like this, right? Where I'm going to take this video, I'm going to chop it up into clips, just like you guys are. And we're going to distribute it across all of these platforms where we know that we can get distribution, right? And it's so, and again, I think it's just back to that, what we were saying, like it's treating everything like it's this like, it's this flywheel that you're trying to spin faster and faster. And so Twitter is one of those moments right now. So
it does feel that way. Like for some reason, I don't know what brought me back to Twitter, because I never put any effort to it until a few months ago, and that's how we connected. pretty much when you started as well. And I think I was your only like for the beer, and now it's like 40 likes every tweet, and I'm like, who are these all these other guys with me? It was just me. And so yeah, it went really fast. It reminds me of LinkedIn 4 or 5 years ago, where it was just the organic reach was just crazy.
Totally agree.
And I think I capitalized on it a little bit at this time. I wish I did more. You can still do it a bit on LinkedIn, but it's very random, and it's usually one post that would just get you like most of your impression. It's really hard to get the consistency, and the type of content is different as well on that platform. But and yeah, so I saw that like shift since the changes with Elon and the blue tick, which improves your impressions 100%. As well.
Yeah, I can talk to that specifically. Like bought the subscription, whatever, the $8, right? And it doubled my daily, like doubled my impressions, basically.
Impressions, yeah.
I mean, people can be like, yeah, I don't want to do this. I'm here to use it as a tool for my business. Like it's not about the
exactly
morality or anything else.
Yeah, it's all about the arbitrage, like you said. If the CPM is cheap and you're trying to get a message out there, like just until it's gone, just milk it until it's gone.
100%.
Really cool.
Sorry, I'm just doing the math right now. So 2,000 CPM for $8, right? So cost per CPM. It's 0.004 cents. Like I couldn't get that anywhere else. Only on Twitter right now. So of course you should be doing this, like if you can, right? Like for your business. There's this whole other side of me that's thought about like, oh, did we spin up this whole, like there used to be like private blog networks, right? Well, what if you do that with like private Twitter networks where it's like, cool, I just like grow, like all AIs grow these accounts. We like give it source data, and like we tell it to write, and then it just does this like same thing that I'm doing. And then imagine you have 10 of those, and it's like, cool, like I have a new product that I'm launching or a new feature or whatever, and I just retweet across all of those, and boom, now suddenly you have this viral post that's for your product, right? Like imagine brands doing that as well. Like I'm thinking about a nude, right? Like they they spin up all of these Twitter accounts that are all about personal finance, and like, one's about hacks and one's about like how to use government subsidy or whatever, right? And like you grow those accounts, and then it's like, we launched this new thing, boom. Like you retweet it from the main account, and you're everywhere. And so I think that's what I'm most excited about, honestly, with all this is like, how are people going to think about owned media, and especially startups? Like how are startups going to think about owned media? And this is really comes from my time at Rupa. So like, this is our thesis there is like, how can we basically build like owned media channels within that we can basically sell advertising on? So like, one of my jobs there, and this is actually how I got into podcasting, was to spin up their podcast. So it's called the Root Cause Medicine podcast. I think it's like a top 20 medical podcast now. When I left, it was like doing like, I want to say around 150, 180,000 downloads per month. So for them, we basically spun this podcast up in 6 months. And then we're like, you know what? I think that we could go and we could sell ads on this, right? And if we sell ads on this, it's going to subsidize the entire growth team. And we're going to take growth from being a net, like, net, like a net negative, like revenue generator to neutral. Yeah, exactly. A cost center to a revenue generator. So we go, and what do? They sell Athletic Greens, they sponsor the pod, and it's basically subsidizing the entire production and like, a portion of the growth team salaries. Right. And I'm over here and I'm thinking like, what is like, okay, they're doing that with one. Now imagine with all of these other, like they also have this vehicle to sell anything on it as well. Right. So like that is this future that I think is imminent and like coming. And what I'm most like excited about it, interested in. And I think it all relates back to like, where you're these creators are going to build these own media channels and then just build these brands and put them on top of their rails. Right. Like they have that direct distribution, but should we talk podcast growth? I would love to just lay out.
Yeah, I was going to say it's a perfect segue into that topic. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So, so again at Rupa, like one of my jobs was like they were like, figure out how to do podcasting. And I was like, all right, I guess I have to like learn this. It's the most rudimentary shit. I mean, you guys know this, but like it's built on top of RSS feeds. Like it's like SMTP, right? Like the tech is like it's so old school. There's nothing like, it's so shit. And so it was like, okay, well, like, can we track any of like where any of the downloads are coming from? They're like, not really. We can't like look at source data. And it's like, well, okay, well, can we like, there's no data analytics really on it. So it's kind of, you have this black box and you're doing these things and then like outcomes are happening, right? So anyways, what we ended up figuring out is there's like 3 things that make a podcast grow. So it's podcast SEO, it's Facebook ads to iOS only devices, sending traffic directly to the podcast episode using a clip as the creative. And then it's growing a newsletter, and I'll talk through each of those. So podcast SEO, what you're trying to do is you're basically you're thinking about the podcasting app as a search engine, right? So think about the keywords that somebody would search that you would want to show up for within like the Apple podcasting app. So for you guys, it's probably like growth marketing or like, like how to market a startup or whatever, right? So you would include those keywords in the title, in the podcast description, in the title of the episodes, and then in the show notes. If you do that and you get downloads, you will show up 100% in the search results for those specific keyword phrases. So it's the most rudimentary like search engine that exists, but it's driving so much like traffic and user acquisition. It's actually like crazy to me that like more companies aren't again capitalizing on this. So that's like one facet of this, right? The other side of it is then basically supercharging like your downloads, right?
Yeah.
So how do you do that? Facebook ads is what we found to be the vehicle for that. So you pull out clips from the podcast, you put them in like a carousel ad, right? You do iOS only devices targeting, and then you do some type of like interest-based targeting, right? So for y'all, again, it would be something like growth marketing interest, or even just like Y Combinator interest, right? So what that does when you target only iOS devices and you do the link to the Apple podcast URL, that's actually a deep link. So it's going to open up the Apple podcast app on their mobile device every time that link clip happens. That's a download, right? So like, for example, I do like, so this is like my other thing that I'm talking about publicly right now, besides Swell. It's this company called Acclaim, and it's just podcast growth. Like this is what we do for people. And really it's like for B2B podcasts. So we're getting 20-cent link clicks, right? So we're getting 20-cent downloads. So I want to show up in the top, 100 charts for, we'll say for you guys, the marketing category, right? I can start to work back like, I think I need this many downloads to show up there. Like this is how much I need to spend to enter that top list. Once you enter that top list, all of the podcasting like websites, they pick you up, right? Because they're all based off of that like popular category page that like they're just scraping Apple, right?
Exactly.
So as you enter it, it creates this like snowball effect. Like you enter that, you get more downloads. As you get more downloads, you climb the list. As you climb the list, you get more downloads. And so it creates this like viral loop. So again, with the podcast SEO piece, the download that you now have this way to prime downloads and kind of get those initial ones off the ground. And then the longer term strategy, and this is more of a gray hat technique. So, just warning for the audience.
To put it out there, warning signs.
Exactly. So
we need more grey hat chat in the world, in my opinion.
So what we do is then we go and we scrape all of the email addresses that are related to the target audience for like the podcast, right? So for y'all, it would be like everybody that's ahead of marketing or like ahead of growth or ahead of content. You go to like an Apollo or LinkedIn or whatever, right? And you scrape all of those emails out. You then take all of those emails and you sequence them into a newsletter that's promoting the podcast, 200 a day. Build an automation. So it's like I upload 200, they get tagged with like workflow, they get put into the workflow, they get emailed the newsletter. Motherfuckers, we are getting like 40% open rates on these cold emails, okay? I can't get that to happen any other way. Like any other way. 40% open rates, 5% CTRs, no spam complaints. And literally the email is like, the newest episode of the, in Growth We Trust podcast is live. Like click the link to listen to the episode. You'll learn, and then it has like a summary and then like bullet points below that, right? And that is the entire email. And you can grow these email lists at like 4,000 to 5,000 a month, right? So like we have clients that we've done this for where it's like this gray list, like they want to do this whole thing in this specific category. We now have a list for them that's 25,000 people. And what it does is it especially in the B2B space, and this is why I focus on, that's also what I know, right? So I stay to what I know. But what it does is it creates this way for them to build like trust with an audience when they don't exist really, right? Like it's a team of 5 people, but I have an email list where 25,000 people from the entire like target market is getting this email every week. 40% of them are opening it, and everybody's listening to the podcast. So what does that do? So the founder is the host of this podcast, right? And they go to a conference, people know them, they want to talk to them. And when they go on sales calls, when they're doing prospecting, I mean, this company that I'm working with right now, they just started cold calling people, right? Because they thought that it would be a good channel. They get on the call and they're like, "Oh yeah, I've heard of you guys. I'm on your podcast email newsletter. Like I listen to it every week." So they're already open to that conversation. I mean, that's the easiest entry point. You don't even have to explain what you do or what you are. Like they already know. Like then it's just like I'm already past that trust building phase. I just go right into selling. And so how I'm communicating podcasting to these companies is like, think about it as like a one-to-many sales, right? You're basically you're doing that week over week, and the amount of trust that you can build when you're in somebody's ears, like everybody's talking about this, right? This isn't a new idea, but when you're there every week and you're in somebody's ears for an hour, like that's deeper than like some of my closest friends, the conversations that we have, right? Like I have this homie that lives in Central Coast, California, my best friend, right? Like 100%. I maybe talk to that motherfucker like once every 3 weeks. Like, and it's like, "Yo, how you doing? You okay? Cool. How's the surf? Sweet. Awesome. Good to hear from you. Tell your girlfriend what's up. We'll see you guys soon." Like that's the whole conversation, right? But in contrast, it's like, I tune into the in Growth We Trust podcast every week. I listen to you two talk about, whatever it is. And you have these crazy people on that are just talking about growth shit. And like the amount, like your audience, it gets so close to you through that process. And it's all built on top of that growth, like those growth mechanisms again of like podcast SEO, Facebook ads, and, just a newsletter. And like, just to talk scale, like we've taken podcasts from like non-existent to a top 20 marketing podcast in the US in less than 6 months, right? Yeah. We did it in like 4. It was like just with those strategies. And like done that in multiple categories, life sciences. We've done it in health. We've done it, there's more niche ones that we do that like are in like insurance and that type of thing. But anyways, that's kind of the opportunity.
That's mind blowing. I feel like all these tips, it shouldn't be free.
People keep telling me to make a course, and I'm like, dude, I don't want to be a course person. Like those are the biggest, like my dude, it drives me nuts. It's like they've got like a 10K Twitter following, and they don't have a single product that's doing 10K MRR. So they're follower rich, cash poor, right? And they're like, "Buy my course," and I'm like, dude, what am I getting from you? Like you're no better than an influencer that has like 500K followers, right? But like can't afford a car payment. Like that is the same level of person. So it's like if I have to, anyways, I'd rather just give it out for free, because what always happens with this too is like, cool, I'd like share this stuff, and then people reach out and they're like, "Yo, I'm doing this thing." So I had this guy reach out to me on Twitter, right? He's spending like $5 million a month right now in ad spend. Okay. And he's like, "Yo, this is what I'm seeing." Like just because I'm talking about this other arbitrage that I'm seeing, like I get all this inbound, right? And I'm like, it's a no-brainer. Like why would, like, of course I'm going to share this. And and then, I mean, there's this other side of it where people are like, "Well, can you show me and all, make me a loom and all this?" I'm like, no, I'm going to give you you can go figure this out, but this is what's happening. Right. So anyway,
I think most people, what always happens as well is, in marketing especially, is you'll hear the tip, you'll get the best advice. 99% of the people would never do anything about it.
100%. So you see that constantly. Like I don't know. I talk to startups all the time, right? Like just like founders, because to me it's interesting. I get to hear what they're building, and it gives me insight. And I cannot tell you. I'm like, "Yo, just do these 3 things. Like do these 3 things for the next 6 months." And then they come back and they're like, "Yeah, we hired a fractional CTO, and like the guy's just like writing reports and shit, but we're paying him 20 grand like to do all this." I'm like, what are you doing? Like, you don't even have revenue.
Yeah.
You're funded. Like, like your runway is 8 months and you're fucking around with a fractional CTO that hasn't touched an ads manager account in 4 years. Like, you think that he can like get in the pit and actually deploy like any of this? No, they're just fleecing you. So, so stop, take a step back, and like focus on 1 or 2 channels and get good at them. And you're gonna, most of the time, you can, if your company actually has like product market fit. I've seen companies with Facebook ads and cold email get to $1 million ARR, right?
Yeah.
Like that's all you need. 1 or 2 channels and you can grow these things. So, but instead they're like, oh, I'm going to do SEO and we're going to do all this organic social. And I'm like, you need transactional marketing, right? Like I do this thing and a thing happens to get me revenue. Like all of that long-term investment makes 0 sense, especially if you're funded. Because you don't know if you're going to be there in 18 months because you might not be able to get your next check because you don't have revenue right now. So like you have to go and do these things that will immediately make impact. Like I always try to equate it to like a financial portfolio, right? So it's like it would be crazy to be like, hey, invest all of your money. Like you're 20 something and you're like invest all of your money in like ETFs, right? And it's like, dude, are you kidding me? Like, so you're not paying your house payment. You're not like feeding yourself. Like you're not having a social life to like build your relationships. And like, you wouldn't do that in the real world. So why are you doing it like in your business life, like in the marketing world? It makes 0 sense. And so it's like thinking about it in that same way. As the company matures, of course, invest in SEO. Of course, invest in like, organic social and building like those own media channels. But that is a hedge because you know that like the arbitrage that you found, like the law of shitty click-throughs is going to happen. And you're basically going to see that the cost for user acquisition is going to increase as all these other people identify the same arbitrage. So you have to have these other own media channels to basically compensate for that increased price. So you can keep your acquisition at the same unit economics, right? So
exactly.
It drives me nuts though, man. That's the one thing, like any SEO, like consultant or firm that is going and selling these startups, like they are fleecing you. They are the scum of the earth. like you do not need that as a seed company or like a series A company even. Like you need to figure out like what is like direct response marketing that I can do. But something else that I think is super interesting is direct mail, like physical direct mail, right? So there's all these APIs that have come out recently, and you can get mail, like physical mail in people's mailboxes for like 9 cents, right? You put a QR code on that with an offer, like, and make it cool, right? Like I'm just imagining like a nude, right? That has like awesome branding, like super like specific service it's providing. You target all the like young demographic, like zip codes, like
renting.
Yeah, exactly. Anybody who's renting, right? And just send those out. I mean, that's such an easy way to do that. And like, there's again, like all of these companies that are doing this, like lob.com, Postpilot, like actually, I think that one of the next company that Max and I are going to build together, we want to do something physical where it's like, I do a digital thing and then like something in the real world happens. And so I think it's going to be in the direct mail space, like some version of this. So
it's funny you say that. I looked into it actually a few months ago in the UK. I couldn't find anyone in the UK doing it. Or it was too expensive. So it wasn't 9 cents. It was like crazy, like £15 per post. And I was like, fuck that. I'm not gonna, that's not the right price for me to be excited. But like 9 cents, definitely. So
totally.
I'll look into it again.
Yeah.
I love that it's with marketing at the moment, it seems like the future is the past. It's like, with all the changes that Apple made to tracking and all that kind of stuff, everyone's going back to, oh, fuck this. We're going to just build a web app instead. We're going to just go back to old school UTMs. We're going to do direct mail campaigns. We're going to build a newsletter. We're going to do a podcast. All of these things have been around for a fucking long time. And if you think of all the technology that's come out, even if you just look at Meta, all of the different ad units that they've had over the last like collection ads and all this kind of shit, and eventually it dies out and no one cares about it. It just goes back to the basics. And I just love that it's like the future is build your email list, market to these people through the channels that make sense, make a podcast, build some content, and do it that way. That's all you need to do.
100%. It feels like 99 again, right? Like
exactly. Soon we'll have like the banner ads of the shouting smileys.
But what happened in the meantime, though, the issue, the reason why it moved away from that is because we got fat since 2008. We got fat.
100%.
0% interest rate, raising money like clicking fingers, crazy valuation, managers on top of managers, and like suddenly you start talking about like nonsense. It's not even logic anymore, but it's because you can afford to burn that money, right? And it was so easy to fall into that. Well, actually, it's not even falling into that. That issue is that you had to conform if you wanted to work for these companies that were growing, like the ones you mentioned, for example, like the Buffer and like those kind of successful company that was built like 10 years ago. You had to conform to that type of like archetype marketer to become a VP of marketing or like the head of growth or something like it. And that I'm glad. The one thing that I'm glad of with how things are being shape up this year is that we're going back to the basics. Like you have to go back to the pit, like you said, in the pit, do the thing that used to work before. Those are the things that we need to do again and like defy gravity.
100%. Yeah. I mean, that's your job too, right? Like as like an early stage company, it's like you're breaking the laws of physics, like with your business. Like they're not supposed to grow this fast. And like with software companies, that's like the whole point, is because like you write code once and it infinitely scales. Like that is what you're trying to do. And so what's funny is that we're breaking the laws of physics with old school marketing again. Like how ridiculous is it that it's come back to this? Right? It's not.
It's like a job requirement should be you can create a QR code, you can build an ad yourself, you can scrape some emails off a website. It's just these are the only things that you need 100%. To do to be able to be successful.
100%. Especially in B2B. I mean, it's not like everybody complicates this, but it's really just like, where are your target customers? How do you show up in their life every day for forever? And what's the cheapest way to do that? Like, that's all. I mean, and really in consumer, it's probably the same thing. There's all of these different, aspects of that. Like we're trying to initiate word of mouth and like, how do I get people to talk about this and the awareness piece? But like, it's all the same stuff, right? It's like, where are the people that want to buy this and how do I be there with them every day for forever? So
pitch them where they hang.
Guys, I have a question for you. Like, what is the goal with the podcast? That's what I'm always curious about with like people building like these things. Is it just to like talk to cool people? Or are you trying to? Because I know I have a lot of friends that are doing this. That are they're like, oh, I want to get into investing and like I want to write checks and raise a fund, which is like crazy that you can do that now. It's like, oh, people have these podcasts and they raise a fund on it because they can like get so much inbound deal flow. But just curious, like your thoughts or like what's your goals with this?
You go first, Jake.
I think I don't think we've even thought about it to that level, really.
I love it. That's the best thing.
The enjoyment of doing it, just like hacking, scrapping, and doing something scrappy and just getting it going. Meeting interesting people is obviously great. Yep. Maybe getting our name out there, expanding our networks a bit. If it gets to the point where we can start a fund and do that kind of shit, that's amazing. Let's not go too crazy because I prefer to err on the side of being a pessimist rather than optimist. So everything is positive if it's going well.
That's where we balance very well. Like I'm the optimist, and you're more like the the British pessimist, typical pessimistic. But
the French optimist and the British pessimist. Premier marketing team. This is what we need.
It's like yin and a yang.
I love it.
I'm the same. I'm only enjoying the weekly thing, like meeting you, cool people, just sharing as much as we can share, like as much value as possible. And low key in the back of my head, I love the growth part of it, and like everything that we mentioned in this episode, we're gonna do, whether it's next week or in a month. It will be
I want
done.
your data, so
yeah. It will be done, and I'm actually I'm doing something slightly different, but I've got a daily thread on Twitter where I pinned at the top,
I saw that
every day. I share the stats. It gets nothing for now, but I'm thinking that in 6 to 12 months when I'm doing it every day, it'll become like the best podcast thread you can find on Twitter, because no one else is doing that on a daily basis. And right now I'm saying like 30 yesterday, 30 downloads or whatever, and then maybe in 6 months it'll be like 3,000, and like people will be like, holy shit, you know. So
totally, and see that timeline.
I love that part, because I think as marketers we get to test through the podcast what we talk about.
Totally.
The kind of reputation and kind of network is a bonus, but once we get there, I love the whole monetization of owned media and audience, whether it's through paid content with extra episodes that you get your audience to support you, sponsorship like you mentioned with Athletic Greens at Rupa. Like we already, between Jake and I, we already know companies that would happily pay us to sponsor the podcast once you get to a certain size. So that's just, you know, a matter of time, or a matter of us wanting to have a sponsor or not. And then adding those like extra stream of like potential monetization, that's maybe in like 6 months, 12 months, we'll see. But that's awesome. Definitely not the primary goal. The
most immediate goal is get some cool merch.
Oh amazing. Yeah, we need to do merch as well. That's one of the goals for sure. That's a good question, man. Thanks for asking.
We have run over, and as much as I don't want to cut this conversation off, I feel like we could do a whole nother
I'll come back in a couple months.
I'm also thinking about the time I need to edit this thing.
We'll do a part 2 with you, Cody, for sure. That was amazing. Thank you for
That's brilliant.
Thank you for coming to the pod and sharing so much with us. That was awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, it was fantastic.
Stoked to see how you guys grow this thing, and I'll be cheering you on. And I mean, we'll see you in the pit, you know.
See you in the pit.